In a truly inclusive society, the welfare of the poor and the marginalized are always upheld, and nobody gets left behind in the push for development. This is the opening statement of the Senate Bill number 2117 by Senator Bam Aquino, requiring the use of the Filipino Sign Language insets for local news programs, which he later on described as the bill that seeks to provide the hearing-impaired Filipinos a luxury which many of us take for granted. In the Philippines, 1.23% of the population is either deaf, mute, or hearing impaired. As of 2009, the projected deaf population was already at 241,624 for those who are deaf and 275,912 for those who are partially deaf. That means that more than 500,000 people have minimal access to media and information because of their hearing impairments. Now, let's take a look at the Filipino Sign Language and its importance to the Filipino deaf community. From its name itself, FSL originated in the Philippines. Unlike spoken languages, FSL has grammar, syntax, and accent and does not have a structure like any other spoken language. FSL is a Philippine distinct sign language system that uses vocabulary and context exclusive to Filipinos. It is the primary building force for Filipinos residing in the country, and it is the core of the progressive view of deafness as a culture and of the deaf and hard of hearing as a linguistic and cultural minority. As of 2001, FSL in an academic perspective is one of the understudied sign languages. There are only 65 linguistics and FSL-related publications, proving the need to include FSL in the Philippine basic education curriculum. Many years earlier, the De La Salle College of St. Benilde saw this need, which paved the way for the development of the DLS-CSB Filipino Sign Language Learning Program, or FSLLP, a program that provides students with basic competency for sign language communication. Many years of countless efforts by the college, the Filipino Sign Language Learning Program is positioned as a hub for deaf culture advocacy, targeting students and associates. But the promotion of FSL didn't come without challenges. FSL is commonly misinterpreted as a visual communication based from the Filipino language, and it is also interchangeably mistaken for American Sign Language. The misconception is primarily due to the wide knowledge gap in the field. While the deaf communities recognize FSL as the official language, this was not the case with the government in August 2017. During this time, the House Bill 6428 proclaiming FSL as the country's national sign language in all transactions involving the deaf has only been passed in its third reading, while its counterpart, Senate Bill number 1455, is still pending in its second reading. Faced with these challenges, Maurice Cordero, De La Salle College of St. Benilde's branding and creative services head, who has no background in social work that is crucial in the advocacy of the FSL, is tasked to find ways to come up with an effective campaign to promote the school's FSLLP based on the slogan, "Be World Ready," with a campaign promise of specialized degree programs delivered by professional faculty in industry-standard facilities. The timeline of this research will begin in September 2018, a month after the passage of the RA 11106, an act declaring Filipino Sign Language as the national sign language for the Filipino deaf and the official sign language of the government in all transactions involving the deaf. The reason behind choosing this specific timeline is that the Republic Act 11106 will be a significant factor in this study, particularly when determining the target market, developing the overall message, and developing the marketing plan. We will examine the case from the perspective of Mr. Maurice Cordero, De La Salle College of St. Benilde's branding and creative services head, who also authored this case. So here's our problem statement. How should the School of Deaf Education and Applied Studies of De La Salle College of St. Benilde promote its Filipino Sign Language Learning Program to increase the number of enrollees per year? Here are our key objectives. The first one is to create an integrated marketing communications campaign that emphasizes the need for working professionals from key sectors to learn Filipino Sign Language. Number 2 is to increase the number of DLS-CSB FSLLP enrollees by 50% by the end of the marketing campaign on its first year, which is school year of 2018 to 2019. And third is to effectively promote DLS-CSB SDS as the institution of choice for FSL learning in Metro Manila. To give us an overview of the areas for considerations in this research, here's JV to discuss the related literature.
Thank you, Marian. Now let's discuss the review of related literature that helps us researchers to understand the case we are presenting. The Filipino Sign Language, or FSL, is the most widely used sign language in the Philippines. So the Filipino signers use it as the main sign language because not every member of the deaf community is able to afford to go to school and learn the American Sign Language, which is the global sign language. So FSL promotes accessibility and inclusivity. So FSL is important to the Filipino community because it empowers them if they are able to freely communicate and understood well. The Filipino Sign Language has been there for so long, dating way back 16th century, and it's believed to begin at the province of Leyte. However, the FSL has been highly influenced by the American Sign Language, just like any language. FSL has evolved and developed, and it has unique grammar, syntax, and morphology. The School for the Deaf and Blind was established in 1907 by DLS, a CODA, or a Children of Deaf Adults. The establishment of this school, which was run by American teachers, highly influenced the Filipino Sign Language. But what's the difference between ASL and FSL? Just like English or Tagalog or Filipino, sign languages differ too. So the Filipino Sign Language uses facial expressions, they use their eyes, their mouth, and even their body to communicate when they are signing. Through this, they were able to show their emotions or whatever they are trying to show. So the American Sign Language is known globally and widely used in America and in Canada. So finger spelling is part of the ASL and it's used to spell out English word. Sadly, there is a notion that ASL is better than FSL, which came from the idea that English language is better than Filipino. FSL is our own unique culture-based language or sign language. Despite the many different cultural influences, the Filipino deaf have managed to assert their independence through FSL. Language is our unique identity, and for the deaf, FSL gives them a sense of pride and belonging. In November 27, 2017, after years of battling with the Congress and the Senate, the advocates in the Filipino deaf community received a light when the Republic Act 11106 became a law. So RA 11106 is an act declaring the Filipino Sign Language as the national sign language. This law mandates the use of FSL in schools, broadcast media, and workplaces. Now, let's go to the frameworks. So let's discuss the frameworks that we researchers used. So first, we have the Advocacy Strategy Framework. The CSB FSLLP is a case study that focuses on the use of advocacy marketing, the strategies, and its effectiveness. So a major challenge for development workers, social change makers, and policymakers is thinking about the process of how change will occur in a certain developmental issue. So there are various theories of change that indicates how change in development is expected to become over time. So the Advocacy Strategy Framework, it aims to resolve these issues and help various researchers in creating change in their advocacies in the communities. So as you can see on the framework, it can be used to illustrate any advocacy strategy in various settings. So the framework is comprised of two main dimensions of an advocacy strategy. Number one is the x-axis. So the x-axis refers to the audiences targeted, and the y-axis, on the other hand, it refers to the changes desired with the said audiences. So within the framework are specific types of advocacy tactics that can be used to achieve policy goals. The tactics are divided into strategic dimensions based on what they are likely to follow on. So these dimensions are which type of audience the tactic is likely to reach and how far the tactic might realistically move the audience along the spectrum of awareness to will action or the will to action. The next framework that we use is the PESO model. So this framework provides an overview of how each channel operates both alone and in conjunction with the other channels. So PESO integrates paid, earned, shared, and owned media for an integrated and quantified communication strategy. So this lets companies come up with integrating marketing plans, reach more people, and position themselves as the leader in their fields. So the main benefit of using the PESO model to plan and run an integrated campaign is that it helps businesses to connect with the audiences they want to reach by using the right content. So like delivering it through the right channel and doing it at the right point in the customer journey. So as mentioned, the PESO model takes the four media types like the paid, earned, shared, and owned media, and you can merge them together. So paid media is like any media that an organization has to pay for it to reach its intended audience. So there are advertisements such as display advertisements, search ads, and boosted social media postings. These are all examples of unsponsored media. Earned media Earned media, on the other hand, it refers to the unpaid publicity, also known as the word of mouth, that an organization can obtain due to excellent PR, public relations, or content creations. Shared media, this is essentially the same as social media, sharing interesting and natural content on Instagram. It is an excellent example of shared media. On the other hand, some forms of user-generated material may be included in this category. Lastly, owned media, in common term, this is the material that the organization creates on its own. For instance, owned media may be developed when a business consistently publishes blogs on its website that address topics pertinent to the sector. So when you integrate the four media types, you may find also like the influencer engagement, partnerships, and incentive programs that extend beyond our internal walls. And when the peso model is working at its best, it can help you establish authority. And authority means you're a thought leader. Others see you as an expert, even your competitors. Now, I turn you over to Ponch to discuss more about our case study.
Thank you very much, JV, for that wonderful presentation. Now we'll head into our situational analysis. Let's start first with the peso. So first, political. So we want to focus on the national focus on the war on drugs by President Duterte during his term. We also noticed that there's a shift of behavior in the LGU. So they would rather focus on the same issues as the president, which is the national drug war. Next, we also have the lacking Magna Carta for people with disabilities. So despite there being a Magna Carta for them, there were a lot of lacking terms and engagements for the PWD community. And lastly, for political, believe it or not, PWDs are being left out in the national census. In what way? If you're blind, if you're mute, if you're deaf, you're all considered PWD. You're not differentiated and categorized properly. So next is economic. We looked into the GDP growth in 2017. We also looked into the inflation rate in 2018. We also looked at the approved budget of the NCDA, or National Council on Disability Affairs, during 2018. And we also took into account the economic instability here in the Philippines affecting the education of deaf children. We all know that sending kids to school is very expensive, and even more so if you're part of the deaf community. Next is socio-cultural. We have 3 points. First is a lacking deaf community data and population. So if you look at research and data, we only have the census for 2000 and 2010, and they're both rather pretty hard to get. Upon checking with the EFOI, they stated that they do not have public records for the 2020 census, especially for the deaf community. Next is Filipino Sign Language as the main sign language. And lastly, lack of studies for the Filipino deaf community. So in the sense that there's no enough research and it's very hard to find supporting evidences and studies for the specific community. Next is technological. We have 2 here. We use technology to help aid the community of deaf people. So 3D animated videos with the corresponding sign language, and we also have FSL number recognition using technology. Next is legal. We have the Magna Carta for disabled persons. We also have the Filipino Sign Language Law. We also have the Deaf Awareness Week, and we also have Executive Order number 417, or the IRR, for the FSL law. Lastly, environmental. We noted that the COVID-19 pandemic affected the implementation of the Filipino Sign Language Law, and we also took into account the eruption of the Taal volcano, which affected a lot of people. Next, we'll go into our next matrix, which is the SWOT TOAST matrix. First is that DLS-CSB is the only institution that offers FSL. They also have an online presence, and they also offer unique, fast, and affordable sign language program. In terms of the weaknesses, they have low intended target enrollees, lack of proper utilization of their social media platform, and no industry leader faculty, and weak internal structure. Opportunities, of course, we took into account the formal passing of the FSL. Next, we also have various NGOs, corporate businesses, and government agencies supporting the advocacy. We also have third-party organizations creating mobile applications using technology and websites to help the community. And lastly, of course, we acknowledge the celebration of the Deaf Awareness Week. So for threats for this case, we noted that FSL is being challenged by different sign languages, even if it's already been proclaimed as a national sign language. There is also a divide in educational institutions on what sign language to teach. There's also a low awareness for sign language as a whole here in the Philippines. And of course, we also took into account the prolonged review and implementation of the IRR for the FSL law. So in terms of SO, strengths, opportunities, we want to partner up with NGOs who support the same advocacy and community and offer them current services. We also want to lower prices to corporate businesses and agencies that currently employ deaf as staff. We also want to utilize further startup applications and websites made by third-party organizations. And with the passing of the FSL, we want to promote CSB as a premier school that teaches FSL. In terms of weakness and opportunities, we have two here. We want to conduct an internal faculty workshop with NGOs to help have a better understanding and background regarding social work for the faculty. We also want to reevaluate the intended target market and enrollees based on the demand of different sectors. For ST, strengths and threat, we want to recommit to FSL as being the national sign language of the Philippines and CSB as the only education institution teaching this. We also want to bridge awareness for sign language as a whole and use the strong online presence as well. Next is weakness threats. We want to re-educate the internal staff and faculty about advocacy and social work to further strengthen their understanding about it. And we want to again streamline the marketing efforts towards promotion of FSL and teaching of FSL. Next, for Porter's 5 forces. So first is the bargaining power of suppliers, where it's very high. It's because teaching the sign language in the Philippines is a specialized field. So more power here in terms of the suppliers. Next is threat of new entrants for the group. It's very low. Again, this is because teaching sign language here in the Philippines is a specialized sector. Next is industry rivalry, which is very high. As stated in the case, there are a number of competitors despite it being a specialized sector. Next is bargaining of power of buyers. So it's pretty moderate. This is because buyers cannot dictate the prices of the services being provided. Lastly is threat of substitute. The threat of substitutes is moderate because the business is the only institution, which is CSB, that currently offers FSL. So in terms of our competitive analysis, so we have DLS-CSB, Miriam, Link, PRID, and paid. At least with DLS-CSB, the total would be around 7,400. They're located at Taft, and of course, they have a high online presence. And of course, they specialize in FSL. For Miriam, they specialize in ASL. Their total amount of modules account to 14,000, and they're located in Katipunan Avenue. But they have a high online presence. For Link, they are located in Quezon City and Manila. They have a total module price of 14,000. They do ASL, but they have a very low online presence. Next is PRID. They also teach an ASL, but their total will be around 14,800. They are in Pasay City, and they also have a low online presence. And last is paid. They have ASL with FSL integration, pretty interesting, but out of the bunch, they are the most expensive with 20,450. They're located at Mandaluyong City, and they have a very low online presence. So that's it for situational analysis, and I'll give the floor to Ali.
Thank you so much, Punch. Now that we know the situation, considerations, and frameworks, let us now look at our ACAs. So based on the recurring themes on the SWOT and TOES analysis, the following ACAs were formulated. The first ACA is to utilize public relations by partnerships with government agencies, local government units, or the LGUs, and non-government organizations, or the NGOs. So let's now look at the pros versus cons for this action point. It is considered as beneficial since government agencies have thousands of employees that can be enrolled in training programs if the FSL law is implemented properly among these mentioned agencies. So, for example, the DepEd, the DOH, and the SWD. However, the government agencies have a lot of programs within their departments, and budget for staff training and development are not their major priority, sadly. DLS-CSB may also be associated with different political parties and ideals, and this may hinder them with connecting with the current government. So let's now look at the rationale behind this ACA. The FSL law was already passed in 2018, which is right after our projected timeline for the case. Partnering with the government, LGUs, and NGOs would help disseminate and implement this law more effectively. With the network that these agencies and LGUs have, implementing RA 11106 would be easy if it will start inside or internally within these agencies, meaning through their employees, staff, and management. So the key message to be used, we will be using the hashtag #DefFilipinoWay. This key message will be used as an overarching campaign message. Each government agency may have their own message intended for certain trainings, but hashtag the Filipino way will resonate both across the deaf and hearing community. We Filipinos love the campaigns that showcase the Filipino spirit and resiliency, and this is why we chose the Filipino way. For example, for the Department of Health or the DOH, a campaign slogan, Save a Life, Learn the Filipino Sign Language Now, has a certain sense of urgency and push for action for healthcare workers to do their part as health advocates for the deaf community. Let's now look at our objectives for this action plan. So the first one is to help implement the FSL law. Number 2 is to help increase brand awareness of SLLP. And number 3 is to be the leading provider of FSL training in different government agencies. For the IMC tools for this action plan, first, we will utilize partnerships as an IMC tool by publishing press and media releases, which are disseminated every time a partnership with the government, LGU, or NGO has been implemented. A sample headline is, quote-unquote, DLS-CSB offers free Filipino Sign Language training for teachers and healthcare workers. So the second is the utilization of social media as an IMC tool. All of the on-ground activation will be supported with a social media post to inform a larger market of these initiatives from the College of St. Benilde. CSB can also share the PR articles on different online publications. And lastly, the usage of celebrities is another IMC tool. CSB can partner not just with the government agencies themselves, but with the celebrity endorsers that they have. So for example, Alden Richards for the Department of Health. There are celebrities and influencers who are advocates of people with disabilities. Here are the government agencies, some government agency and LGUs that would require their employees to undergo FSLLP. So for DepEd, access to education is one of the major challenges of the deaf people as identified by the deaf and hearing community. So DepEd should implement the nationwide learning for Filipino Sign Language of teaching and non-teaching personnel to encourage more deaf people to attend school and gain knowledge. The lack of interpreters in the education system hinders deaf people from attending school. For DOH, aside from hearing impairments and deafness, the deaf people experience other sicknesses and medical conditions too. The lack of interpreters in the hospitals and healthcare services can cause losing a life. A campaign, Save a Life, Learn the Filipino Sign Language, can be launched by the DOH to encourage healthcare workers to learn FSL. Whereas for DSWD, they have a program called a comprehensive program for PWDs. So through this program, the DSWD allocates budget for training, rehab, and development. Moreover, it is intended to enhance PWD's capacities to attain a more meaningful, productive, and satisfying way of life, and ultimately become self-reliant, productive, and contributing members of the society. Now, from national to local, the researchers also suggest partnering with LGUs, of course. So some LGUs are actually role models since they include deaf people as part of their workforce, such as Pasig, Quezon City, Antipolo, Baguio, Antique, Camarines Sur, and the province of Quezon. So for this action plan, the key performance indicators or the KPIs is number 1, the number of training attendees from different government and LGUs. And of course, the number of press releases to be picked up by the publications, whether print or digital. Now for our second ACA, Our second ACA is to empower the DLS-CSB community as advocates of the Filipino Sign Language Learning Program. So let's now go over the pros and cons. The first pro is to, by educating the faculty, students, and staff with the usage of FSL, it will strengthen the university's advocacy for the deaf community and will make a long-term impact on the organization's reputation. The next one is to incentivize the community to engage in a referral program which has a direct influence on improving awareness around FSL. The third one is to empower the community to inspire testimonies and feedback from the deaf and hearing communities. This can provide more opportunities to develop its program in order to address the needs of the target market. Now let's go over the cons. So of course, with this action plan, we will need to collaborate across several DLS-CSB community divisions in which each of those divisions may have their own processes and rules that may impede on the implementation. Number two is to, it may become difficult to quantify the impacts of empowerment, making it difficult to establish a valid success metric. And the third one is by gaining attention and involvement of people in the community, it's harder to engage them, especially at the beginning of campaign. So for the rationale of this ACA, change should be championed from within the community. Mobilizing the community to be advocates and champions of FSL is an effective approach to demonstrate its commitment to its advocacy for the deaf community. So it will also boost credibility and most importantly, have a significant influence on the promotion of FSL, even outside the academials. So of course, our key message again for this action point is also hashtag the Filipino way with the tagline, Usapang, Senyas at Kumpas. So Benildians as advocates of the FSL and allies of the Filipino deaf community. So the objectives of this ACA is to emphasize and instill the community and the significance of FSL to the deaf community via education and training. Number two is to urge the whole DLS-CSB community to accept and actively promote FSL inside and beyond campus by actively being active as positive models, advocates of change, and supportive allies of the deaf community. And lastly, of course, to motivate the community to promote and refer enrollees in the program, especially through appropriate and efficient incentive programs. For this ACA, we're going to use, number one, social media marketing as an IMC tool again, using the promotion of the FSL community events, programs, and content using social media. The second one for our premise for this social media marketing is that we will create a dedicated group for the FSL community events and programs for forums, community events, and activity updates, as well as social and networking opportunities for the deaf and hearing communities. The second IMC tool that we're going to use for this action plan is public relations. The first one is an FSL crash course or introductory modules. So we will create modules for the program for the faculty or the staff or students to use within the community, and it will show them the importance of FSL. The modules may include, for example, short introductory course with an overview of FSL and learning the deaf culture. So those are just some examples. The second example that we can do for PR is community events. This is going to be done by holding monthly meetings and events to open conversations around the deaf culture, Filipino Sign Language, and such. The third one is through print and newsletter by distributing print collaterals such as brochures, pamphlets, or flyers to educate the community about the deaf. And the fourth one is through outdoor advertising materials, through posters, banners within the campus, through the College of SDEAS, and other relevant areas in the campus. The third IMC tool that we're going to use for this ACA is sales promotion. So sales promotion through the usage of incentives to DLS-CSB students who can refer a friend, a family member, or a colleague to enroll in FSL-LP. So incentives can be form of tuition fee referral discounts or swag bags. The target market for this ACA is number one, of course, our primary target market is through the faculty members first, through the educators first, then followed by the students and the staff. The key metrics for this ACA is to number one, the number of community member participating in FSL or deaf community related activities and conversations. Number two is the completion of FSL intro modules. Number three is through the number of FSL LP inquiries or applications. And number four is through the number of employees through the referral program.
Let us now look at our recommendations for this case study. So from the two proposed action plans, we have analyzed the best applicable course of action with a weighted decision matrix, as shown in this table, to analyze the criteria and scoring based on 4 factors, which is number 1, the ease of implementation, number 2, cost efficiency, number 3, ease of modification, and number 4, long-term impact. So we have divided these 4 factors into equal weights, and we have found out that action point 1 is slightly higher in terms of our scoring, with 65 out of 100 versus action point 2, which is 55 over 100. So the rationale behind this is considering the results, we formulated that actually both action plans are essential for the success of this language program by DLS-CSB. So with action plan, it uses public relations. Although it may take some time with the implementation, since we are partnering with government agencies, LGUs, and NGOs, we project that this will have a long-term relationship and effects, leading to successful results. So with the passing of the FSL law in 2018, the case analysis timeline fits perfectly, actually, with the possible imposition to partner with these relevant stakeholders. Meanwhile, action point 2, which advocates the FSL within the community of CSB, this may be done at a short-term basis. This also has an easier sense of implementation as well, but this should be made with radical change. This will only work when everybody's on board, of course. Mobilizing the advocates and champions of FSL is an effective internal approach. So we will start with the educators and the professors, then move to the next secondary target market, which are the students and other staff members of the community. While there's only a 10-point difference within the action plans, we have seen that ACA 1 has prevailed than the other, with the premise that partnering with government agencies is proven to be more effective and widespread to different relevant key sectors. So it will also foster the proper implementation of the FSL law itself. But
this does not change the fact that if these two ACAs are done simultaneously, a greater result may come out from both campaigns. So this will be done effectively to achieve the objectives of the study. So for our recommendation, we will use these two ACAs together and use the target market as shown. We plan this research to primarily target the 30 to 49 years old, all genders, primarily belonging to the lower middle class, since most of them actually are government officials or government NGOs and LGU employees. Of course, we want to focus more on Greater Metro Manila first because the university is in Manila. Of course, it will also be someone who is related to or someone who knows a deaf individual, so they would sympathize with them better. Primarily works in the government sector and feels strongly with the gained awareness of social issues. They may also be extroverted with a continued interest interacting with new people, and of course grounded with a sense of advocacy and seeks new adventure and knowledge. Our secondary target market, on the other hand, is 21 to 55-year-old, all genders, maybe belonging anywhere between the middle class to the lower class, residing in Metro Manila, specifically within the vicinity of Taft, which is where the DLS-CSB campus is, and nearby areas. Since we plan to do the second ACA as well. So these people are actually the people who are studying or working in DLS-CSB, actively participating in extracurricular activities by the university, and they have routine works around the academe. So they also have a strong sense of community and principles on what they believe in, and they're actually easily persuaded to join causes which matters. They're also very outspoken people and maybe even a social activist. So the proposed campaign name for our recommendation is the hashtag The Filipino Way. This message is believed to strongly resonate with the Filipino culture, both for the deaf and hearing communities. The moniker is used to sound exactly like the Filipino Way. This is actually the bigger picture of our case. We want to promote and foster effective discourse with synergy and trust between the hearing and deaf communities, or nobody gets left behind or cast out in any discussions, whether if you can hear or not. With the proposed campaign tagline, this also supports the campaign overarching message, Usapang Senyas at Kumpas. So as the tagline explains, this encompasses the use of senyas, which is the Filipino word for signing, and kumpas for gestures. So the word usapang comes from the root word usap, which means discussing or conversing. So this tagline actually translates for the need of discussion using sign language, which encapsulates the campaign in a nutshell. So let's now look over our implementation plan and the campaign launch using our IMC tools. So as mentioned, with the passing of the FSL law on August 2018, we have chosen to work within the last few months of 2018 as our pre-work. So we have targeted these action points, such as reaching out to relevant stakeholders, review marketing budgets and manning, and actually polishing our marketing plan, creating brand guidelines and style guides, and of course, reviewing the team's responsibilities, expectations, and annual KPIs with the new law. So this is distributed within the last 4 months of 2018. And we will officially start the hashtag The Filipino Way campaign in 2019 from January to December. So we have identified a few action plans within this Gantt chart, which is such as conceptualizing marketing collaterals, of course, every quarter, and of course posting in social media websites constantly to remain afloat in the social media channels. And of course, running ads as well would be helpful since we have more guidance and materials in social media. Having them as an ad will help propagate the program more. Of course, sending out press releases per quarter is also helpful, especially if we have events. The usage of celebrity influencers and advocates will be used during the latter part of the year from October to November, because this is where most of the deaf awareness weeks and months are situated. For the content dedicated for groups, we will do it every other month to remain relevant, of course. And for print and news letters, we will also do it every other month. For OOH and other advertising campaigns, we also chose to use a 6-month retainer at the latter part of the year. And of course, content on social media will always be present, as well as the incentive system that we plan to roll out by March, once all the details with the administration of CDEAS will be approved. So that is our implementation plan for the hashtag The Filipino Way. And now I turn over the floor to Marian to discuss the final part of our presentation, which is the current status and related cases.
Thanks, Ali. Now let's have a quick look at the current status of some areas related to this case. Let's start with promotions and updates from CSB SDS in 2022. So January of this year, Benilde opens a bachelor program in sign language interpretation, which is the first bachelor's degree program in sign language interpretation in the Philippines. And sometime between September to October of this year, they've also announced their partnership with Overtho for their hashtag Good Sign project, which is a series of in-person FSL sessions. In terms of events and activities, SDS actively holds events such as the upcoming Alumni Summit 2022, which is the celebration of the Deaf Pride, Resilience, and Fellowship with the theme Forward Together. Benilde SDS also does different advocacy programs such as consultation on deaf access and PWD inclusion, deaf awareness orientation, customized Filipino sign language crash course, and the Young Deaf Summit. The CSB SDS also has adequate online visibility. Their official website provides an overview of the offered programs, courses, schedules, and frequently asked questions. They also keep an active presence on the variety of social media platforms, the most prominent of which are Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And on these platforms, they would post regular updates about their programs, partnerships, activities, and events. In terms of FSL law updates, the implementing rules and regulations of the Republic Act number 11106, known as the Filipino Sign Language Act, were signed on December 6 of 2021. That was 3 years after the law's effectivity. In terms of education, we've seen some developments, partnerships, and movements for FSL led by the University of the Philippines, the Department of Education, and Komisyon sa Wikang Pilipino. That's about it. Thank you so much for watching our presentation. Have a great day.